Shogma, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Indigenous Languages Podcast, hosted by the University of Arizona's American Indian Language Development Institute, or AILDI for short. For those of you who don't know us, AILDI provides sustained Indigenous language education experience to students, community members, educators, scholars, researchers, and language advocates alike. Our mission is to provide critical training to strengthen efforts to revitalize and promote the use of Indigenous languages across generations. This is accomplished by engaging schools, Indigenous communities, and policymakers nationally and internationally through outreach, transformative teaching, purposeful research, and collaborative partnerships. Today we have another special episode. This is one of two episodes we're recording on site at the Symposium on American Indian Languages, or SAIL, which this year is planned collaboratively between the University of Arizona's Native American Languages and Linguistics Program, or NAMA for short, and AILDI. And I'm joined here by two guests, Philip Cash and Inés Hernandez Avila, who are both Nez Perce language advocates and who work for the North Star Collective. So thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself? I'll start with Phil.
Inwas, Wailit Puka, Niimiipuutimt, Wa Inem Wanikt, Philip Cash, Ka Kustita, Wailit Putimtki Wanikt, Pitamianan Max, Ka Et Katiayo Kinawas, Piamkin Kayoh, Oikalo Titokadimtki at Chichkits Laamna at Tzechna. I'm just speaking now my Nez Perce language. I introduce myself. I'm Cayuse in Nez Perce, and my name is Philip Cash. My traditional name is Pitam Yanan Max. And I also said I am just amazed to be here at this meeting speaking on Indigenous languages. Is really a good experience.
Tatsala. Good afternoon. Hello and good afternoon. In las tama tolakay. In what Manakise Inés Hernandez Avila. I am Niimiipu on my mother's side, from Nez Perce. We're enrolled on the Cobble Reservation in Washington State. On my dad's side, I am Tejana, Texas Mexican, and Mexican Indigenous from my paternal grandfather's side from the area of San Luis Potosí in Mexico. I teach at UC Davis in Native American Studies. I've been there for approximately 37 years. I'm retiring on June 30th. And I'm really happy to be part of Luk'upsíimey and to be here at this conference on Indigenous languages, which is so central, critically central to anything that we do as Native peoples.
All right, well, I'm very thrilled to have both of you here. This morning, you both gave us a wonderful plenary talk here at SAIL about your work at the North Star Collective. So since most of our viewers were not able to attend in person, I'm sure, would you guys mind explaining to me what the North Star Collective is and what you do? I think I can go to either of you.
Yeah, sure. In August of 2020, I and Beth Piatot started talking about organizing a group of Nez Perce creative writers and language advocates. And after we initiated those early meetings, we called upon 5 other individuals, and we formed what is now Luk'upsíimey, the North Star Collective. And the name was chosen by our group, and it's symbolic of our commitment to language. It reflects the name Luk'upsíimey is a Nez Perce word describing the North Star or the pole star, and it actually translates as without moving. And as you understand by looking at the North Star, it doesn't move while all the other stars revolve around that point. But there's underlying Nez Perce philosophy related to that name. In particular, it references the idea of surviving or enduring in life, where you face the hardships and without, shying away or whatever. And so that's become symbolic of a virtue of Nez Perce behavior. And so we're using that as a symbolic statement to our commitment to the Nez Perce language.
So the idea is that Niimiipuutimt, our language, is our North Star. We meet as much as we can. We don't always meet on Fridays, but that's our regularly scheduled meeting day. And we meet when we're fortunate and have the possibility to do so. Our meetings are about 2 hours long, and we do a number of different things. We do language work, archival work. We've done things like listen to recordings, especially at our retreat, in our first writers retreat that we held in Wallowa at the Nez Perce Homelands in July of 21. And we looked at archival materials, listened to recordings of elders who have now passed on, and listened and studied the written text. So we do that kind of work. We do dictionary work. And then we also give each other prompts, creative writing prompts, and we read what we write to each other in the session. We also plan, our activities, because I think as Phil mentioned this morning, we immediately got started being invited to present. And in 2018, we had already, Phil and Angel Sabata and I had already participated in the performance of Beth Piatote's play Antigone at UC Berkeley, which we performed in the Hearst Museum. So it was a significant.
Wow.
It was a significant event to happen because it had to do with our ancestral people, and Berkeley's doesn't have a good reputation about the way they handle, things like that. Anyway.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you guys do a really wide variety of activities, a lot of different kinds of work, and I think that's fantastic. So one thing that jumps to mind is if other communities around the country or elsewhere want to start something like this for their own community, what kind of steps would you recommend that they take?
I would say that first is creating a safe space where individuals, both creative and those that might be considered as language learners, come together and simply begin their inquiries into their indigenous language without any barriers like embarrassment or shame or what have you. So it'd be a need to be a space of trust and exploration. And then therein lies the emergence of a commitment towards deepening one's understanding about the language. So it begins from simply self-awareness, and then initiating a choice, and then through that, then you start to really examine what and where you are or your community is with that language, whether it be with no speakers or with abundant speakers. And so you want to choose at what point you want to start. And the creativity actually emerges naturally when you start to examine the heritage language very carefully. And you actually do see the beauty and the strength and the wisdom in the language itself. And, it's not necessarily an abstract system, but therein lies some of the assumptions about what language is. So you want to be able to deepen your understanding and really carefully look, and you will see the hidden gems and the beauty and everything that you long for is there present in the language. So that part is probably the very first step, is just, deepening your understanding, clarifying your desire to work with your language.
And that safe space is really important because I know for me, when years ago, without Luk'upsíimey, when I was trying to speak, even my relatives would laugh at me because I speak, some of them said, well, you kind of speak with a Spanish accent. And so it was funny, but it wasn't, right? Because I do know those two. I know English and Spanish, and I do know that I probably tend to pronounce, when I see something, that's probably where I go. I don't go to English, I go to Spanish. And so it's a struggle, right? It's a struggle, especially because Niimiipuutimt has a lot of glottal sounds, and I'm not used to those. But I remember one meeting where Angel Sabata said, we need everyone. We need everyone. If you're Nez Perce and you want to work on your language, we need you. It's an endangered language. And so that's the driving force. But the other thing to accompany the safe space is the dictionary. And we're really fortunate that we had a scholar like Haruo Aoki write the Nez Perce dictionary, the 1,304-page Nez Perce dictionary. And so another thing that I would suggest to people who are like me, taking baby steps compared to some of the rest of the members of compared to all the rest of the members of the group. But when I'm doing dictionary work, I do what my heart tells me. So my heart told me I wanted to know the words for praying, to be able to pray. And so I started looking for those words for prayer and for spirit and for, sacred, making things sacred, or seeing the world in that way, right? And so that's when I'm doing my own language work by myself, those are the words that I'm looking up, and I have this log that I'm keeping, right? So you can, any person can choose, like, well, I'm gonna look for this, right? And it doesn't mean that you're not gonna do all the rest of the stuff, but to keep your own self inspired, you need to look for the things that really move you and fulfill your heart and make you happy that you're doing this work.
Yeah, something that you mentioned there that struck a chord with me is talking about how sometimes learning to pronounce your native language properly can be really difficult, and I think that's for any of us that weren't raised with our heritage language but are trying to learn it now. It's one of the biggest struggles is training your mouth to do what is in your heart, and that can be easier said than done.
Well, and it's beautiful to listen to the recording like of Elizabeth Wilson, one of our elders who proficient in the language, beautiful speaker, and you hear the music of the language when you listen to it.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah, you hear how it's supposed to sound, right? And so it's part of your memory then. The more you listen to that, the more it's part of your memory, and the more you can say, set your intention that this is where, I know I'll never get there, but I want to set that as my...
Yeah, Well, I think it's important to remember, if you're a listener and you're a learner of your language, and maybe you're feeling insecure about your ability to pronounce your language, just keep in mind it. Although, yeah, you're never going to reach that level of a native speaker. Probably, it's the most important thing is that you're trying and that you're
Yeah.
learning it. That you're speaking it. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Never be discouraged on where you're at, especially if it's a challenging situation with your language. And just earlier today, I spoke with a young lady who is working on revitalizing her community language. And I asked her, well, how many speakers do you have that you can work with? And she said, we don't have any speakers remaining in our community. And I was really taken aback because that's a very, very severe and unusual, challenging situation. But it's going to be more common than we may really come to know because a lot of communities are like that. They're only a handful of speakers, and you want to be able to hear them and work with them as much as possible. But in situations like that, having a resource that you can draw upon becomes really vital. If you have recordings, those should be preserved. If there are any notes and records left by a linguist or anthropologist or even a community intellectual, those become very valuable. And just, start to explore those materials in a very thorough manner and acquaint yourself with the depth of your language. And it's going to be filled with a lot of discoveries and surprises, and it's going to be heartwarming and very profound in a lot of ways, just as Inez was saying.
Yeah, as hard as it's going to be, yeah, I promise it's going to be a fulfilling experience for you if you haven't started learning your language yet.
Well, one
This
of
is
the
your
things
sign.
I do want to say, and I want to acknowledge Phil's work on this, is that he's the moderator of a Nez Perce list, and that's so. I mean, I don't know if other communities are doing this, but it's really good. It's a really good resource because this is Phil's passion, and so he'll post, look what I found, or he'll post something humorous, or he'll post, and all of that promotes us paying attention. It promotes us paying attention. I save all of I never discard any of those messages. They're all in my inbox, or I printed them out, or I copy them and I put them in the list of words that I'm keeping for myself. And that's so helpful. If there's a possibility that someone in a community has those abilities, those skills, right? That's so helpful.
What Inez is talking about is I created a email listserv focused on Nez Perce, and that was going on about 15 or more years now. We've had this listserv, and it's all devoted to the Nez Perce language, and I post linguistic-oriented material, narratives, mythic narratives, photographs, and news, all regarding our community. And anything is open to discussions on that listserv, but a lot of the language is very very useful because you wouldn't consider some of the things you discover in our trove of language materials, as, especially with plants and animals and things of that nature, which you didn't know you had a name for that particular plant or that animal, and it becomes really fascinating to learn.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating to hear about. Thank you. So, in your talk this morning, you also shared with us some beautiful poetry, and I thought it would be a great idea if our listeners at home could also hear some of that poetry, if you guys are up for it. Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
All right. Let's
Okay,
hear Inez's poem.
sign in
Oh,
again.
we'll give you a minute. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I think that poetry is just such a powerful tool for language revitalization. And in one of our previous episodes with Ophelia Zepeda, if you haven't listened to that yet, you should definitely go back and listen to that one. We also talked about the power of poetry for language revitalization.
So this one is called Coyote Defends Himself. And this goes back to the Nez Perce list, right? So Phil will post, sometimes he'll post a saying and then he'll translate it, and he might make some linguistic comments about how it's said or how it could be said otherwise. But when he posted this, the first line is from his post. So it's, and I will do my best in the reading. Kala iche yaya itolai kana, hiwa ika. Coyote went upriver, he was busy doing nothing. He came upon his thoughts, words placed in his space, in his being. Watma emana chi watko, itseya bamna was we good ibats. Don't get yourself into trouble, Coyote. You're always prone to make mistakes. Yes, he thought, this is true, but I always pick myself up. I get up from my mistakes, shake myself off, and I keep going. Surely that has to count for something. Kala icheyaya, itolai kana, hiwa wiyaika. He heard how he was described. He thought to himself, but I'm not doing nothing. Inat what the way say, I'm chanting. Gyute, I'm beating a drum. Lautiwa na naksa, I'm feeling friendly. Kane kise, and I'm thinking. Keyu say ni, I'm going home. Tala pusaka, I will pray in the old way.
All right, I really like that. I liked the interweaving of the English and the Nez Perce together. This was really interesting. And I've never heard Nez Perce spoken really before today.
Well,
And
yeah.
And
it's a beautiful language.
Yeah, it even.
We're a little bit biased. It's the most beautiful language.
Oh, of course, yeah. All indigenous languages are beautiful,
right.
But of course, we all have our personal preferences. So Phil, you have a poem as well, yes?
Yeah, it's actually a song, and I'll go ahead and sing it for you, but I'll interpret the words in the song. There's a heritage language speaker named Elizabeth Wilson, and she's a classic mythic storyteller and very, very well versed in all of the mythic narratives from our cycle of narratives, and contained within one narrative called Pups Palo. It's about a cannibal who turns on his brothers, and and eventually they have to deal with his behavior. But in the course of the narrative, he sings as he goes around looking for human flesh. So this is the song. Tukach mina paps palom titimain hi pamchio hokas kama hikataut elix ihi hi yoh 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 Tukehmina paps balon titimaim hipamchio hokas kama hikatautalix ihihi hi hi yoh 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 Tukehmina paps balon titimaim hipamchio hokas kama hikatautalix ihihi hi hi yoh 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 yoh.
Wow, thank you, Phil.
So that is the cannibal singing, and the words are translated as, I wonder where fur people's maidens will hear me. Oh, brothers, he killed and ate. And then the onomatopoeia ihihi is actually, he had eaten his flesh, and the lungs are exposed, and so he's breathing, trying to breathe like a normal person, but he cannibalized his body. And then yoh yoh yoh, those are the bones rubbing against each other as he walks, and so he's singing have eaten because he cannibalized himself as well.
Wow, that's definitely a dark subject matter, but I still think it sounded quite beautiful anyway. I think that's just the power of the language.
It is. It's a very beautiful song.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Well, before we end this, are there any last thoughts that you two want to share with us?
I got the strong impression that there are really aware younger people here at this gathering, and that's very encouraging because they're very like I and Inés and members of our collective, very committed and very aware of what needs to happen. And I get that feeling from these younger people that are here, and it's very encouraging, and it's a good feeling. So I just wanted to make that observation.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with the panel of poets. They were beautiful. They were wonderful. And they were all a little bit nervous, but then they seemed to get over it, especially the elder, the first speaker. She, all of a sudden, she went into her flow. And I really respect that work that Professor Sabella did with them. And I got to talk to a couple of the readers, the two younger ones, and I told them how much I love their poetry, and anyway, it was exciting for me to hear them and to meet them and to have a chance to have a conversation with them. And we thought about doing something similar with our group. You know, we like that idea of what Sabella did with her community, and so we're hoping we can do something similar.
Yeah.
Ourselves.
I agree with what both of you said. I was really impressed with a lot of the talks here at SAIL this year. I think we had a very diverse and interesting group of speakers, and I also was very happy to see a lot of young people, as Phil said. There's a lot of people that seem to be in their 20s or early 30s that are really dedicated to that language work, and that's just extremely heartwarming to see. It's about time we cut this off, so I would like to again thank Phil Cash and Inés Hernandez Avila for joining us. They are both from the North Star Collective. Do you guys have a website or something? Or
Not yet.
not yet?
Yeah, we're
working on it.
working on it.
Okay, they're working on a website.
We're working on
So sometime
those
in the
kinds of
future,
things.
definitely check out the North Star Collective's website. And we'd also like to thank you, the listeners, for listening to today's episode. If this is something that you enjoyed, we'd really appreciate it if you could share this with your friends, your family, your social media followers, your community, or whoever you want. It would really help us a lot. If you want to keep up to date with new episodes, remember to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AILDI. And also feel free to check out our Facebook page. We'll put links to all these in the description. And lastly, if you'd like to donate to AILDI, through which this podcast is funded, you can do so on our website. Again, thank you for listening, and thank you both for joining us. Till we see you again.
Okay, thank you.